And yeah, normally most of the talks I give are about synthetic biology or biogas or microbial ecology. And this is a different one, but I like very much giving this talk. So first, I'm not going to give this talk because I'm the best speaker in the world. I'm not. But many years ago, I received one of these talks from one speaker. I will mention him later. And I think it was very interesting. So maybe there are a few things that you can learn or just have some ideas in order for you to improve your presentations. So how to give a scientific talk, how to give a talk. That's a wonderful quote by Leo Tolstoy. So all great literature is one of two stories. A man goes on a journey or a stranger comes to town. It is true, I think. If you think about the books you may have read, about the operas you have been, or the movies you have seen, almost in all cases you can recognize this structure of a man goes on a journey, a man or a woman, of course, or a stranger comes to town. This is particularly clear in Westerns. And of course, when you use the word Western, most of you will think about the picture in the left and Clint Eastwood and all those spaghetti Westerns were done here in Spain, in the Tabernas Desert, a place in which we go very often to take some samples. And that's the classical idea of the Western, in which you can very clearly see these two structures. So the stranger that comes to town and trouble starts, or the man that goes on a journey. But besides the Western, the classical Western in the sense of this kind of cowboys movies, you can recognize exactly the same scheme in other movies. For example, I don't know if you have seen this one, A Bug's Life. So it's a wonderful movie, wonderful soundtrack, and it's a Western. It's totally a Western. There are bugs, but it's a Western. The Seven Samurai. So there's an Akira Kurosawa great movie, and this is also a Western. So you can recognize the structure of a Western in many kinds of movies, of plays, and maybe in your talk as well. So this is something that I would like just to stress here. I gave this presentation a few years ago, and Andres was super interested, so he raised his hand and he asked me that. So how long does it take? I was very surprised by his question at the beginning. But after that, I thought, of course, how long does it take to make a, let's say, well-prepared scientific talk? So I do not have a clear answer. It depends on many things, on the difficulties of the subject, or how long is it. But I think that the short answer is a lot of time at the beginning, but not much when you have experience. The good thing is that there are just a few tricks that you can use, and if you use them, it's very easy. And then I think that we may have a discussion after that, but it shouldn't take that long. We started with the title, right? The title, Tips and Advices on How to Prepare and Give a Scientific Talk in Order to Maximize the Audience, and I don't give a So how not to title your talk. Very often we see these kind of titles in the talks, in the scientific talks given by super good scientists, and it's a pity, because with this title, you just don't get the point. So use evocation. So I think it's better this way, right? So do it short, do it clear, do it evocative if you can. A very important point of the present talk, and something that I would like to transmit to you, is that we humans communicate through stories. All humans, all cultures, every time. So this very nice picture here of an old woman, maybe in Africa, giving some kind of speech or telling a story to those kids, it's exactly the same thing of this very spectacular, and sometimes I don't like them very much, but well, a TED talk is just the same thing. It's a human being giving a story, telling something, sorry. So you can have, once again, these stories in operas. I have used this great movie here, Metropolis by Fritz Lang, because if you have seen it, it's amazing. It's like an opera, but it's a movie at the same time, and of course in books. And I have chosen this one because a friend of mine told me once, and I think it's good, that if you read twice this book, every time is different. So you can have this feeling of reading and rereading, or viewing and reviewing a movie, and every time is different. But in any case, it's of course a story. So we are scientists, and in a presentation, of course, there is a story, blah, blah, but finally you're going to show your data, you're going to show results. How do you do that? And this is very often an aspect of the presentation that is not well done, because the students or the researchers tend to be so proud of their work, which is good, that they put everything there. So all my graphs are there in this slide. So the audience cannot get anything of that. This is not the objective. So the objective of scientific talk is never to show the audience how much you work and how much you know, is to make them learn something. And if you want people to learn something, you have to use small pills of information. So this is an example, a perfect slide, in my opinion. So there is a title, Plastic Production Still Grows Exponentially. Short title, clear title. Then there is a graph that repeats the same message. Plastic production still grows exponentially. Then the x-axis and the y-axis are displayed there. And it's an evocative image that describes the same thing that you are talking about, plastic. Without this, if you are very attentive, you will get the point. But with this, it's very clear. It's just 2 seconds. How long does it take for you to understand this? It's almost immediate. Then you have this title and a short title that can correspond or not to what you are saying. In this case, I could be explaining that and saying more than 400 million of tons of plastic are produced worldwide every year, and the trend continues to increase. So everything I'm saying is the same thing, but I'm saying it in a different way. So you have this, you have this, you have this, and you have this. You are repeating the same message different times, but in a way that people do not realize that you are repeating the same message every time. So if we analyze this graph, then you have a short and clear large title that is a summary of the results that you are showing here. You have a shorter, a smaller font information that more or less corresponds to what you are orally saying. You have the graph with the x and y axis. And something I like to do is to combine data with evocative images. Example, if instead of plastic we were talking about pH, and the pH was decreasing, so it was becoming more acidic, you could put a lemon here. It's so, you see the lemon and it's clear, everything is clear. So it gets more acidic, okay? So the power of images to strengthen the graphs and the text is amazing. So use images. Look for beautiful visualizations. So if you're going to prepare your presentation, you should look for interesting visualizations. Of course, these are just examples that they found on the internet, but it is important that you use, that you work a lot in your visualizations in order to make them appealing. And once again, it is important not to use too many. This is nice, but this is difficult to understand. So you just put one and oof, you breathe. Now you can understand what is this. Coastal hotspot for plastic pollution in the Mediterranean, then you can see where they come, etc. So this is easy to understand. So people have understood that, and then you go to the next slide, whatever it is. This is just an example again. You're combining here several things. So in fact, there are 2 graphs in the same graph, but they are simple enough to be combined. So you have this one, plastic production, that increases, and carbon emissions, that increases as well. And then you have like an evocative figure here, which is the world map. So it's simple enough for people to understand. Yeah, something I like to do in my talks is to focus a little bit on aesthetics. And I know that normally it is not the case in scientific talks, because people tend to say, well, if you have a wonderful scanning electron microscopy picture, you just put it there and it's going to be beautiful. Well, this is true. But then the composition is very often forgotten. And I am going just to give you some examples of things that I like to do. And of course, you are free to do it or not. One of those things is what is called the golden number, that refers to the Fibonacci series. And basically, what says is that we humans like asymmetry very much. And this kind of distribution in which you have like 2/3 of one space occupied by something and the rest occupied by another thing is very nice to see. And I'm going to give you some examples of that. So this slide, I showed it to you previously, and you didn't realize that this cross was not in the center. It was not in the center on purpose. So I place it here because I find it nicer to have this cross here. And it corresponds exactly to this golden proportion. This is something I use. Tamara de Lempicka, such as a wonderful Art Deco painter I like very much, even if most of the women that were painted by her look like Isabel Ayuso a little bit. But anyhow, so the composition here, it's almost exactly this. So you can find this mathematical distribution. Also, I assume that the square, the surface of this stain of painting is approximately as well the one corresponding to the golden number. So the main lines of composition corresponds very, very well to this. In the case of Matisse, it's almost perfect. It's amazing. You have this line and this line as well. In some other cases, imagine here that Modigliani, the theoretical composition should be there, but in fact it's not exactly there because this is like pushing the composition towards the left part. You can see very well here. So it's like too high, right? But this lemon and those berries is like pushing it, and it's nice. So for some of you, can be surprising what I'm saying, but it's everywhere in marketing, publicity, in movies, in everything. So this is one possibility, but maybe you would like more this one or this one. Just consider there is a full world of different possibilities when you give a scientific talk, and not only the boring 4:3 version. And some people use, and I like this very much, this widescreen proportions, the ones in the movies, and it contributes very much to tell the story. Because when you see that, it's like, wow, I'm in a cinema, and this is like a movie. So this is something that you can consider to go beyond the classical composition, to put everything in the center. The fact that you may be able to use this asymmetry that allows you to tell the story in a much dynamic way. For example, what do we do in the morning? We wake up, and then we go to work, and then we have lunch or dinner with our family, and then we go to bed. Let's go in to see it again. So it's right, left, and this is very easy to do. And I have used this example, but if you are using graphs, please do it, because otherwise all graphs do look very similar. And otherwise, very often people are not sure whether they are looking at the same graph that they were looking 1 minute ago or not. If you are doing this, it's very clear, because then when you change the graph, clang, the other graph goes to another part of the screen. So I think it's a very useful way to change of different topics and to make things that look similar to look, in fact, a little bit different, because you are changing the place they are on the screen. So that one here, once again, as short as possible, the key message. Don't be afraid of void, not horror vacui. So void is cool. Some people tend to put graphs everywhere, and this is horrible. And once again, this is symmetry. Okay, combine fonts. And this is something very often I don't do. But when you do it, it makes a difference. So you can find in the internet a lot of websites in which you can find which kind of fonts combine with which kind of other fonts. And when you do it, then you realize that it's very nice. So you can use some specific fonts for this kind of text here, and some other fonts from the smaller text. And together, as you can see here, it combines very nicely. It gives a very good impression of modernity and artistic thing. Connect with the audience. This is a talk, so I'm here, you are sitting down, you are listening to me, I guess. But if I'm just giving a talk without connecting with you, it's going to be poor. If I do something that allows me to connect with you, this is something you're going to remember. You will certainly not remember of all of my slides, but you are going to remember what I'm going to do right now. As I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, very often I give talks about synthetic biology. And one of the subjects that I've been working for some time is standardization in synthetic biology. And I always use one example. And then since I have a bottle, sometimes I drink. I'm not going to do it now because it was there for 2 weeks. But you say, is there something in the audience, someone in the audience who has a bottle of water? Is it an actual question? Do you have a bottle do you have one? Can you show it to me? Okay, can you please open your bottle and try if this fits into your bottle? You try it. Does it fit? Yes. Why does it fit? Because it's standard. Because it's cheap, it's universal, it's a very good way to make things, to make them standard. So this is just a simple demonstration that you can interact with the audience, and with this thing, I can assure you that people are going to understand what a standard universal device is. Be careful with that, because you must be ready for failure. Sometimes I do that, and there's someone in the audience with Solán de Cabras. And then it does not fit. But this is super interesting. Why it does not fit? Because Solán de Cabras is a very expensive water. So it's so expensive that they can change the design of the bottle and use a non-standard device. The same thing that Apple does. Apple is not cheap. They can do that. They can afford that. So it's even in that failure, and people are going to laugh because, haha, it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit, but then you explain that, and everybody will remember that, as I hope you will remember this. So interact with your audience. So some guidelines for a talk, to make a summary of what we have been talking up to now, is first most important thing, a talk is a story. Use the perfect slide model, so use simple pills of information, change from one side to the other. Less is more. Do not add too much information. Connect with the audience, not just making jokes about some groups in the society. So make general connections like this one. Everybody could understand that. Repeat, reinforce without getting noticed. I don't know how many times I have been repeating the same message up to now. Evocation, metaphors, quotes, stories, people. So we humans love people. And whatever I do or whatever I say here, whatever I will show you, if it's human-based, is much better than if it's just a picture of a tree, of a machine, or a graph. So that's very important. And something I particularly like, if your talk is just fair, but the end is great, the whole talk will be remembered as great. But if your talk is good, is really good, and the last part is just a piece of shit, people will say, how was that talk? Well, not bad. So in the books it's the same, in the movies. A good ending is super important. And there are tricks, very, very easy tricks to end a talk with. So look at this. So this slide and this slide is the same one, the same information. But I have applied my advices here. So this is asymmetric. The picture is there. It's not in the center. I have combined the font here. Okay? So this looks more professional than this. But it's the same information. Okay. A good talk must end catastrophically. This is something that I learned from Carlos Pedros Alió, is the researcher, the microbiologist, one of the best microbiologists in Spain, that I mentioned at the beginning of this talk. I was in a meeting like 5 or 6 years ago, maybe more, and he was giving 2 talks. One about the microbiology of the ocean, wonderful talk, and then one talk titled something like How to Give a Scientific Talk. So a few of the things that I have included here are from him. And this is one of them. So he mentioned that a good talk must end catastrophically. I don't know if you knew, I learned this recently, that actors in Greece had a very curious name. They were hypocrites. So the name hypocrite comes from Greek, means actor. When you say you are a hypocrite, you mean that you are an actor because you are pretending to be something that you are not. But anyhow, in the Greek plays, there were several parts of the play, and the last part was called the catastrophe. So by using the word catastrophe, what you are actually saying is that this is the final part. And of course, you have to concentrate your efforts to get to the audience in this final part, because this is the last thing that people are going to hear before going home or to work. So let's concentrate on that. But before that, let's analyze this slide that, once again, I have been using some tricks. So first, short explanation. Short title, a good talk must end catastrophically, which is the summary of everything I'm saying here. A longer extension that more or less corresponds to what I'm saying. If I'm totally lost or something happens to my brain, then I can still read this, and more or less it will make the joke. The distribution, here I have chosen a spiral, which is very common in marketing as well. And this kind of pictures is a much better choice than this kind of picture. It's the same. So it refers to Greek theater, right? Greek theater. But this is just stones. So it's a wonderful place, but it's just stones, just material. If you can show people, always choose people. That's why people end scientific presentations with a picture of the group, because our human beings smiling is nice to see, much better than watching some stones. This is very personal, but I like to finish talks with one of those. So, number one trick, a good quote. Humor, metaphor, irony make people think. This is a very good way of finishing a scientific talk. Second, a metaphorical image that will people just wow, the wow factor at the end. Third, back to the beginning. This is overwhelming, is always present in literature and in movies. At the end, it's like, I don't know, Star Wars, when Han Solo in the last movies appears, it's like, wow, Star Solo. Why? Because he was at the beginning. So closing this circle gives a feeling of completeness. So, and you know that the end is close. And then the power of the last word that we will see just in a few seconds or minutes. Of those 4 different possibilities to end a scientific talk with, normally I use one, but in this talk I'm going to use all of them in order for you to have an example. So this talk was about how to give a scientific talk. So if you want to finish with a quote, this is a very good one. Rudyard Kipling, if history were told in the form of stories, it would never be forgotten. It's wonderful, and it is true. It's like a joke, it's like a story of someone that has happened to a friend that had an accident or that found someone that was very funny. Then you will remember this for years. And then if you read something, a scientific paper, you will not remember it for years. Why? Because it is a story. And once again, story is the way we humans communicate. Number 2, back to the beginning. This combines 2 different endings. So there is the quote, and there is the back to the beginning quote, because it's Tolstoy. I used Tolstoy in my first slide, and it is not by accident that I could use it in the last one. So we are asleep until we fall in love. It's not very good, but it was not easy to find another Tolstoy's quote as good as the other one. But there has something interesting. Love. Why love? Because we have been, this is not a scientific presentation, but if this was a scientific presentation, I could be talking about metagenomics, about proteins, about 3D, I don't know what. So data. If you finish with more data, it's like when you work with someone that is working with, I don't know, the HP70 shock factor, whatever, and then you go with that person to the cafeteria to have lunch, and then he or she continues talking about the things. No, not now. Let's have our spaghetti in peace. So let's talk about Eurovision, for example. This is something that you can do at the end. Use something that is related with feelings, and that it is not exactly and does not correspond to the scientific background that you have been giving. So second ending, back to the beginning. Third one, a metaphorical image. I don't particularly like this one, but it was very obvious. So in this presentation, I'm talking about a story, so the end of the story. You could also choose other things here. For example, like the end, like it appeared in the old movies. It would be a nice way. Pretty obvious, but it's one possibility. And one of my favorite ones is this one, the power of the last word. I am not going to ask you, because Julie Beneteau is here, how many of you have not read The Origin of the Species? But if you have not, please do it. And it's a pretty thick book about, as you know, natural selection as the main key player behind evolution. But the word evolution itself is not in the book. It's amazing. Well, it is in the book. It's the last one. And this is the very, very nice writing of Charles. Every time I say it, I have do you have the same thing, Julie? I know. So there is grandeur in this view of life, which this planet has gone cycling from so simple a beginning, endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful have been and are being evolved. So he placed, I wonder whether it was intentional or not, that's not important maybe, the word evolution, well, evolved, as the final word in the book. And this, of course, makes an impact. So that's very important. Two things I would like to highlight here. When I prepare a talk like this one, I never learn by heart the sentence that I'm going to use. I like improvisation. But I always know more or less what is going to be the last sentence, and I always know what is going to be the last word. I know what is going to be the last word of this talk. Can you imagine which is going to be? Imagine. You will see them. This is one thing. Second thing, when I said this feeling that I have, which is true, and I asked Julie, do you have the same feeling? This is something that you, I assume, liked very much. And you like because when it's the same thing when you sing or something. When you share your fragility with the audience, people like that. I think this is something that allows you to transmit the message to the people, and this is something that some people use for flirting as well. But well, this is a different story. We are not here yet. Good. So, in summary, and this is the last slide, this is the way, and Mandalorian says, well, this is not the way, this is my way to carry out presentations, and this is just a list of suggestions, but in fact there are many ways. There are many ways to give presentations, but please keep in mind that the central message of this talk is that whatever you do, whatever you say, it must be a well-told, clear and touching story. So thank you very much.